Almost every country on Earth is buried in debt. But who's lending all this money, and why are we all part of this massive debt chain? Have you ever heard on the news or social media, the government is spending billions again and the country's already drowning in debt? Everyone gets angry, worried. But here's the weird part. Almost every country in the world is in debt. Yes, you heard that right. France, Germany, Turkey, the UK, Qatar. Rich or poor, it doesn't matter. Every one of them owes money. Some owe the IMF, some owe banks. I even got my coffee saying, "I'll pay later," just trying to keep up with the global system. Sounds crazy, right? But hold on, we're just getting started. Okay, so you're saying every country has debt, but why do countries borrow money? Why don't they just say, let's print more money? Is debt really such a bad thing? And maybe the most common question, who exactly do countries owe all this money to? Can a country ever be completely debt-free? Let's find out together. Part 1. What exactly is national debt? When we talk about a country's debt, we call it national debt. That means the total debt of a country's central government. Just like you or me taking a loan when we need money, governments borrow when their expenses exceed their income. But here's the difference. Countries don't go to a single bank. They borrow from other countries, financial institutions, and sometimes even from their own citizens. You might think national debt means everyone in the country owes money, but not quite. It's only the central government's debt. Local government's debts are calculated separately, and personal debts, like credit cards, mortgages, or car loans, aren't included either. In short, national debt equals the government's problem. Personal debt equals yours and mine. Okay, but why does the government take on so much debt? Let's talk about that in Part 2. Part 2. Why do governments need to borrow money? I know what you're thinking. But countries have printing presses. They can just print money whenever they want, right? Good question, but it's not that simple. If a government thinks the more we print, the richer we get, money floods the market like a waterfall. Sure, there's more cash, but suddenly everything becomes insanely expensive. That's called hyperinflation. The result? Money loses its value and everyone starts complaining about prices. You wake up one morning, your wallet looks the same, but you can't even buy a loaf of bread anymore. That's hyperinflation in action. So yes, printing money sounds easy, but it's also the fastest way to destroy an economy. Borrowing, on the other hand, brings order and stability because there's accountability. Governments must pay interest. They can't just shrug and say, hey, we'll print some more. So why do they borrow? Here are the 5 main reasons. 1. To cover the budget deficit. The government's main income is taxes, but sometimes taxes simply aren't enough. Imagine the government collects $3 trillion but needs to spend $5 trillion. What happens to the missing $2 trillion? They have 2 options: raise taxes and make people furious, or cut spending and make everyone miserable. So what's the easiest path? You guessed it, borrow money. Sometimes borrowing isn't bad, it's actually smart. Think about it. New roads, bridges, airports, hospitals, schools, all necessary but expensive. Should they wait decades and frustrate everyone, or borrow and look like heroes? Guess which one they pick. And it's not just short-term gain. These projects often boost the economy and increase future tax revenues. So, yes, it looks like debt now, but it's really an investment in the future. Wars, geopolitical tensions, economic crashes, energy shortages, natural disasters, pandemics, climate issues, you name it. During these times, governments need quick access to cash. For example, After Japan's devastating earthquake and tsunami in 2011, the country borrowed an additional $230 billion to keep the economy afloat. That debt-funded reconstruction, aid programs, and infrastructure repairs. 4. To repay old debts. Yep, governments are masters of the new loan to pay the old one strategy. How? Simple. They take out a new loan in 2020 to pay off one from 2010. And the cycle continues endlessly. But here's the danger. If it gets out of control, the country falls into a debt spiral. And the result is almost always the same: budget deficits, a weakening currency, and a heavier burden on citizens. 5. To maintain economic balance. Sometimes borrowing isn't out of necessity, but rather a strategic economic tool. By issuing government bonds, the state can control money flow in the economy. If inflation is rising, they sell bonds to pull money out of circulation. If the economy is slowing down, they borrow more to inject money back in. In short, debt is sometimes the gas and brake pedal of the economy. So, who exactly lends all this money to countries? Here comes the most interesting part. Part 3. Who are the creditors behind government debt? These debts often reach trillions of dollars. So naturally you wonder, who's rich enough to lend that kind of money? In reality, countries borrow from 3 main sources. 1. Domestic investors, their own citizens. 2. Foreign investors. 3. Their own central banks. Domestic debt. Yes, even you can lend money to your government. Sounds strange, right? But when you buy a government bond, that's exactly what you're doing. You're lending money to the government in exchange for interest later on. Think of bonds as a loan to your country. And it's not just individuals like you or me. Banks, pension funds, and even government agencies buy them too. Foreign debt. Government bonds aren't limited to locals. Many foreign countries invest their excess reserves in other nations' bonds. It's a safe way to earn returns while indirectly funding another country's economy. So while one country borrows, another profits. But when a country's economy is weak, investors lose confidence. That's when global financial institutions or stability programs step in, offering low-interest loans with heavy conditions attached, like raise taxes, cut public spending, privatize companies, open markets to foreign investment. So the money comes, but with a diet plan included. And the public usually says, enough is enough. Central banks, sometimes governments, borrow from their own central banks, but that's basically a polite way of saying printing money, and it's risky. Printing money means devaluing it, and that means inflation. That's why most countries now do this indirectly, through more subtle, behind-the-scenes mechanisms. Part 4. Is national debt always a bad thing? Short answer, not always. It depends on how the debt is used. If managed wisely, debt can grow the economy. If mismanaged, it can destroy it. When debt funds investments, it's beneficial, but if it's only used to pay off old debt, it becomes dangerous. If a large portion of income goes just to pay interest, then education, agriculture, energy, defense, healthcare, and infrastructure all suffer. Investors start to lose faith, thinking this country might collapse, and credit ratings drop. Yes, countries have credit scores too, just like you do at the bank. Once that rating falls, borrowing becomes harder and interest rates skyrocket. The result? A debt crisis. How much debt is too much? You might ask. There's no strict limit, but economists often look at the debt to GDP ratio, how much a country owes compared to the size of its economy. Around 60% is considered safe, but some nations go 4 to 5 times higher and still stand strong, so maybe the problem isn't the number, it's the management. Part 5. Are there any debt-free countries? In theory, yes. In practice, almost none. Today, there are virtually no completely debt-free nations, And honestly, being debt-free isn't even a good idea in most cases. Why? Because being debt-free means raising taxes or cutting spending, both guaranteed to make people furious. And if a country has no debt, it also has no bonds. No bonds means no safe investments for pension funds, so debt isn't necessarily a sign of bad management. It's often just another economic tool. Conclusion: debt isn't a threat. When used wisely, it's the fuel for growth. If managed properly, it strengthens the economy. But if not, it brings collapse. So the real question isn't why are we in debt, it's how are we managing it. In my next video, we'll take a visual journey up the global income ladder, from those living on just $1 a day to those whose wealth earns more in interest than they could ever spend. Subscribe so you don't miss it, because when that video drops, we'll all be asking ourselves the same question: where am I on this ladder?